Good evening all, and welcome back to FEAR NOX. Tonight, we idle along a damn road where wind slices across early ice and sound carries too far. These 10 verified accounts come from ranger notes, rescue logs, cabin journals, and recovered radio traffic pulled after alarms reset to calm. Shoregrass rattles like wire, powder skates over black ice, and turbines beneath the wall breathe in a low, steady hum. You'll hear a crack walk the span like a slow match, a beacon strobe without throw, and a call sign answer from an empty cove. Some threats move as poachers on sleds, running dark across closed water. Others live in pressure ridges, thin ice near inlets, and white-out gusts that erase trail and time. If you're new here, welcome to FEAR NOX, where real horror never sleeps. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story we uncover. There's something waiting here every night. Out here, even silence carries weight. Every echo is a question, and not all of them fade. Now, let's step onto the ice where even the air remembers.
I've been a reservoir ranger for 14 years, covering the high country here in the Sierra. It's a vast, unforgiving landscape, especially in winter. My patrol area includes the entire main reservoir, an artificial lake nearly 10 miles long, fed by snowmelt and held by the old concrete gravity dam. My primary tools are a four-wheel drive truck, a pair of Steiner 10x50s, a VHF radio, and an intimate knowledge of the ice. I know where the currents run strong, where the pressure ridges form, and which inlets tend to thin first under a spring sun. March 22nd, 07:15 hours. Air temperature was 3 degrees Celsius, wind out of the northwest at 8 knots. The ice was officially closed for all motorized traffic a week prior, on the 15th. That's a hard deadline. The freeze-thaw cycles start to stress the structure, creating unpredictable pressure seams and soft spots. My morning patrol began as usual, starting at the dam road cut, a high vantage point overlooking the southern end of the reservoir. I logged the weather, checked the ice thickness at the nearest shore access point, a solid 18 inches, but that meant nothing for the middle of the lake. The reservoir was quiet, a vast expanse of white and gray under a sky still holding the last blush of dawn. The metallic scent of the cold air, sharpened by the high altitude, mixed with the faint, sweet smell of thawing pine sap carried on the breeze from the distant shore. I set up the tripod for the binoculars, sweeping the main body of the reservoir. It was a clear morning, visibility excellent. My eyes tracked the familiar lines, the old riverbed, the submerged stumps, the distant point beacon marking the entrance to the north arm. For a moment, a dark smudge on the ice, far out, caught my attention. My first thought, a fleeting one, was that it might be one of the last ice fishing shacks, a few stragglers who always pushed the season. But then I remembered the closure, and the shape was wrong, too elongated, too low. I adjusted the focus. It was a snowmobile, dark, low-slung, moving fast. It was a good 2 miles out, maybe more, heading roughly from the main inlet line towards the point beacon. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate violation. I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Unit 1. I have an unauthorized motorized vehicle, snowmobile, on the main reservoir ice. Appears to be heading northeast from the inlet line. Approximate coordinates 37 XXN 118.YY. Requesting confirmation of no authorized craft and potential support." Dispatch came back within seconds. "Unit 1, negative on authorized craft. Repeat, No authorized vehicles on the reservoir. Maintain observation. Do not engage on ice. Do you have a visual on numbers? I swung the binoculars back to the sled. It was still moving, a dark streak against the pale ice. As it angled slightly, I got a better look at the cowling. There was tape on it, dark tape, covering the area where registration numbers should have been clearly visible. Deliberate concealment. This wasn't just a joyride. Negative dispatch. Cowling appears to be taped over, unable to identify. Subject is making good speed towards the point beacon. My heart rate picked up. This wasn't typical. Usually trespassers were locals, maybe pushing their luck, but they'd have visible plates. They'd stop if they saw a ranger. This one wasn't slowing. I grabbed the truck keys, planning to drive the shore road to the north access point for a closer look, maybe intercept. The drive would take 15 minutes, 20 at speed. That meant the sled would be long gone, or deep into the more dangerous ice. I kept the binoculars fixed on the sled as I moved. It passed the point beacon, then veered sharply north, away from the main channel, heading into a known area of significant pressure ridges. This was where the ice plates met and buckled, forming jagged, unstable terrain. It was also where the reservoir narrowed, and the wind-driven currents could cause rapid thinning. I remember thinking about the simple breakfast I'd had that morning, oatmeal and coffee, a mundane detail that felt utterly disconnected from the cold, focused intensity of the moment. Dispatch, Unit 1. Subject has passed the point beacon, now heading north into the pressure ridge zone. Still making speed. Advise ETA for ground support. Unit 1, nearest unit is Unit 2, approximately 30 minutes out. Maintain observation. Do not approach the pressure ridges. I knew the protocol. Don't risk yourself. Observe, report. But the sled was still moving. The dark shape, now a distant speck, seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then it was gone. Not a sudden break, not a splash. It just faded. One moment it was there. The next, the line of the ice was unbroken. I swept the binoculars across the spot, back and forth, my breath fogging the lenses. Nothing. Just the vast, empty expanse of the reservoir. Dispatch Unit 1. Visual lost. Subject appeared to enter the pressure seam area north of the point beacon and is no longer visible. No splash, no obvious breakthrough. A pause from dispatch. Unit 1, confirm visual lost. No signs of incident. Confirmed dispatch. No signs of incident. Just gone. By the time Unit 2 arrived, another ranger, we had established a search grid. The protocol for an ice incident was clear. Establish last known position. Deploy ice-penetrating radar if available. Send out a drone. Prepare for cold water recovery. But the crucial first step, finding a point of entry, was missing. We spent the next 4 hours on the shore, then on skis at the edge of the closed ice, carefully approaching the area where I'd last seen the sled. The pressure seam was exactly as I remembered it from countless winter patrols, a series of jagged, overlapping ice plates, some pushed up several feet high, others forming deep fissures. But there was no hole, no fresh break, no debris, no tracks leading into the seam, nor out of it. The wind had picked up, dusting the surface with a fine layer of fresh snow, but not enough to obscure recent activity entirely. If a snowmobile had gone through, there would be a clear, dark opening, a disturbance, something. There was nothing. "Are you absolutely certain, Ranger?" the supervisor asked later that afternoon, his voice tight over the radio. "A snowmobile, no splash, just vanished?" "Yes, Supervisor," I replied, my voice hoarse from the cold and the tension. Dark Sled, taped numbers, faded into the pressure seam. I watched it. We continued the search for 2 more days. An expanded grid, a drone flying thermal scans, even a small ice-capable boat at one point, pushing through the slush at the edges of the seam. We found nothing. No tracks, no oil slick, no broken ice, no sign of a person. The standard search protocol, designed for finding evidence of a disaster, found nothing to find. It was a protocol that failed because there was no disaster, only a disappearance. The incident was eventually logged as an unconfirmed visual of unauthorized vehicle, possible misidentification. But I knew what I saw. A dark sled running across closed water, its numbers hidden, fading into a seam that remained stubbornly, unnervingly intact. Every winter, when the ice returns, I look out from the dam road cut, scanning the distant point beacon and the pressure ridges beyond. And sometimes, in the pre-dawn light, I still see a dark shape, just for a moment, before it disappears. I've been on night patrol for the state park system for 17 years. Most of that time has been spent around the Lake Shawnee Conservation Area. I know every curve of the shoreline, every dip in the access roads, every seasonal change the lake goes through. Winter patrols are usually quiet. A lot of driving, checking gates, making sure no one's trying to ice fish after hours or joyriding on the frozen surface. My equipment is standard issue: a 4-wheel drive truck, a powerful LED spotlight, a FLIR thermal imager, a throw bag, and a set of ice picks I've never had to use, thankfully. The air on these nights often carries a faint, metallic tang, a smell of frozen water and damp earth that's unique to deep winter. My primary protocol for ice is simple: never trust it. Even after weeks of sub-zero temperatures, there are always variables: subsurface currents, spring activity, snow cover insulating thinner spots. So, I always maintain a safe distance, use my optics, and listen. The lake has its own language in winter: groans, pops, the occasional deep rumble of a pressure ridge forming. These are predictable, part of the natural expansion and contraction. My job is to recognize the normal and report the abnormal. This particular night, the air temperature was a steady 18 degrees Fahrenheit. No wind, clear sky. A perfect night for the ice to settle. I was making my final pass around the northern shore, approaching the outlet where the lake feeds into the Shawnee River. This section always requires extra vigilance. The current here keeps the ice thinner, more unpredictable. I pulled the truck onto the small gravel turnout, killed the engine, and stepped out. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the packed snow. I grabbed my spotlight and thermal imager and walked to the edge of the bank, about 30 yards from the water. The outlet was frozen solid tonight, a rare occurrence. A thick, uninterrupted sheet of ice stretched from the shore across the narrow channel. I swept the spotlight beam across the surface, checking for open water, for signs of stress. Everything looked normal, a smooth, almost black expanse under the beam. Then I heard it, a sharp tick. It wasn't a groan or a pop. It was precise, singular, like a small branch snapping underfoot, but amplified. I swung the spotlight back to the area where the sound originated, near the outlet edge, maybe 50 feet out from the bank. There was nothing, just the smooth, dark ice. I waited. Another tick. This one was about 10 feet further out, along a line parallel to the outlet channel. I swung the beam again, faster this time. Still nothing visible. My thermal imager, a newer model with a good battery life, showed a uniform blue-green across the ice. No heat signatures, no anomalies. I remember thinking about a summer afternoon years ago, teaching my niece how to skip flat stones across this very water, the way they'd bounce and splash. The contrast with the current, still frozen desolation was stark. A third tick. This one was further still, again, along the same invisible line. The sound was distinct, almost metallic, and it was moving. It was walking the span. I lowered the imager, switched off the spotlight, and just listened. The silence returned. Then, tick, tick, tick. Each sound was followed by a brief, almost imperceptible pause, then another, further out. Like a fuse burning, but silently, invisibly, until the next segment ignited. My heart started to pick up. This was not normal ice behavior. This was too regular, too deliberate. I raised the spotlight again, aiming it at the origin point near the outlet edge. Nothing. I swept the beam slowly, carefully, across the ice, trying to anticipate the next sound. Tick. The sound came, and then, a fraction of a second later, the beam revealed a hairline crack, impossibly fine, appearing exactly where the sound had been. It was like the sound itself was generating the physical fissure. I tracked it. Tick. The sound, then the crack. Tick. The sound, then the crack. The sound stayed ahead of the beam each time. I could sweep the light ahead, try to catch it, but the sound would always precede the visible evidence. It was unnerving, like chasing a ghost. The crack was moving with an almost unsettling precision, a perfectly straight line extending from the outlet edge, across the channel, heading towards the mid-span mark of the frozen lake. It wasn't branching, wasn't spiderwebbing, just a single thin line, advancing in tidy, rhythmic increments. My usual protocol for reporting unusual ice activity involves describing the type of crack, its length, any associated pressure ridges, and its potential hazard. But how do you report a crack that forms after you hear it? A crack that moves with a discernible, almost mechanical rhythm? I fumbled for my radio, pulling it from my belt. "Unit 1 to dispatch," I said, my voice a little tighter than I liked. "I'm at the Shawnee outlet, observing unusual ice activity." "Go ahead, Unit 1, dispatch replied, calm and clear. "I have a crack forming. It's moving across the ice from the outlet channel towards mid-lake. It's sequential, like a fuse. The sound precedes the visible crack." There was a pause. "Can you clarify, Unit 1? Is there an open lead? A pressure ridge forming?" "Negative on an open lead. A pressure ridge. It's forming with the crack. It's advancing with it. Every time I hear a sound, a new segment of the crack appears. The sound is ahead of my spotlight beam." I knew how this sounded. I was struggling to articulate what I was seeing, what I was experiencing. My professional training felt inadequate. "Understood, Unit 1. Maintain safe distance. Advise if conditions worsen." Dispatch sounded professional, but I could hear the slight hesitation, the unspoken question of my sanity. I didn't blame them. I was questioning it myself. My mistake was not having my external audio recorder active from the start. a lapse in my usual documentation procedure due to the sheer strangeness of the event. Now, the moment of the first few ticks was lost. I kept moving, trying to keep pace with the crack's advance. It was heading directly for the shore weed line on the opposite bank, about 200 yards across the frozen channel. The air was still, the cold biting, but I barely felt it. My focus was entirely on that rhythmic tick and the subsequent appearance of the crack. As it approached the mid-span mark, the effect became more pronounced. The ice on either side of the advancing crack began to buckle, slowly, deliberately. A low, grinding sound accompanied the ticks now, a deeper resonance that vibrated through the air. This was the pressure ridge advance, but it wasn't the slow, general heave I was accustomed to. It was a precise, surgical displacement, following the exact line of the walking crack. The ice on one side would lift a few inches, then settle, only to be followed by the next segment. I walked faster, my boots crunching a frantic rhythm on the snow, trying to keep up. I knew I was getting closer to the ice than I should have been, abandoning my own rule of maintaining distance for an unknown phenomenon. But I couldn't tear myself away. I needed to see it through. The crack reached the opposite shore, right at the shore weed line. The weeds, frozen stiff, were suddenly pushed aside, crumpled as a final decisive tick reverberated across the lake. The grinding ceased. The ice settled with a final shuddering groan that was more like a sigh. I swept my spotlight along the entire length of the newly formed pressure ridge. It was perfectly straight, extending from the outlet edge to the opposite shore, a clean, unbroken line. The ridge itself was shallow, perhaps 6 inches high, but it was pristine, as if drawn with a ruler. The thermal imager showed no residual heat, no friction, just uniform cold. I stood there for a long time, listening to the renewed silence. The lake was still. The crack had walked its span, completed its journey. It felt like something had been accomplished, a task performed. I radioed dispatch again, my voice flat. Unit 1, the crack has reached the opposite shore. Pressure ridge fully formed. Activity has ceased. Understood, Unit 1. Any further observations? Negative. Just the ridge. I paused. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. The way it moved, the sound, it was always ahead of the beam. Dispatch acknowledged, then informed me a supervisor would be out in the morning to assess the ice. I knew what they'd find. A perfectly normal, if unusually straight, pressure ridge. There would be no evidence of the rhythmic ticks, no proof of the sound preceding the light. Just a new feature on the frozen landscape. A silent testament to a phenomenon I couldn't explain and couldn't forget. I got back in my truck, the heater a welcome warmth against the deep chill that had settled into my bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. My work is in remote systems maintenance, primarily sensor arrays and navigational aids in the high latitudes. For 15 years, I've been the one monitoring the pulse of these remote outposts, ensuring their data streams flow and their lights shine, even when no human eye is there to see them. My rig is a purpose-built overland vehicle, packed with diagnostic gear, satellite uplinks, and enough cold-weather survival equipment to last a week in a blizzard. Most of my day is spent in front of a bank of screens, running diagnostics, adjusting parameters, and occasionally dispatching a ground team, which sometimes means me, to a site. The call came in just after 0300, a routine automated alert from Beacon Array 7. Nothing critical, just a flagged anomaly in the visual spectrum output from a single point tower, designated 7C. The system reported a discrepancy between the beacon's internal photometric sensor and its operational status. The beacon was active, drawing power, and its internal sensor registered full luminosity. Yet, the auxiliary dome camera, positioned to monitor the array's immediate surroundings, showed something else. I pulled up the feed from Dome Cam 7. The camera was mounted on a central mast, providing a wide-angle view of the ice field where the beacons were spaced. The night was clear, stars like scattered diamonds, and a thin, high drift of snow swirled across the hardpack. Most of the beacons in the array were visible as crisp, pulsing points of light, their beams cutting through the dark, throwing distinct pools of illumination onto the surrounding ice. This is the core protocol for a navigational beacon. Emit light, illuminate the environment, provide visual reference. It's a simple, fundamental principle. Then I focused on 7C. The dome camera's lens flared, a brilliant starburst obscuring the beacon itself. The system was registering an overwhelming light source, pushing the camera's automatic gain control to its limits. This was the camera gain ghost effect, where an intense light source bleeds across the sensor, creating artifacts. Yet, outside of that blinding flare, the ice around Beacon 7C remained flat and gray. The swirling drift, which should have been highlighted by the beacon's beam, sat dull, almost invisible against the dark. There was no throw, no reflected light. The beacon was a point of pure, unadulterated brilliance, but that brilliance ended exactly where the beacon began. It was like looking at a hole punched in the night, filled with impossible light. I adjusted the camera's manual gain, dropping it down, then down again. The flare receded, but the anomaly persisted. The beacon itself was a tiny, impossibly bright pinprick, almost painful to look at, yet the surrounding ice remained stubbornly unlit. The contrast was jarring. I checked the logs. Power draw was normal. Internal temperature readings were within spec. The photometric sensor inside the beacon reported maximum output. Everything pointed to a fully functional light source, yet the external observation contradicted it entirely. I spent another hour running remote diagnostics, cycling the beacon's power, adjusting its pulse rate. Nothing changed. The internal sensor always reported full output. The camera always showed the blinding flare, and the ice around it always remained dark. My supervisor, a pragmatic woman who'd seen her share of strange sensor glitches, suggested it was likely a localized ice buildup on the camera lens, creating a prismatic effect. "Go out there," she'd typed. "Clean the lens. Calibrate the beacon if you have to." It was a 4-hour drive by snowmobile to Array 7. The sun was just beginning to etch the horizon in pale orange as I packed my cold weather gear, diagnostic tablet, and a specialized lens cleaning kit. I remember thinking how simple this would be. A quick wipe, a log entry, and I'd be back for a hot meal, a minor mistake born of overconfidence in routine. The air was still, biting. The snowmobile hummed, its tracks biting into the fresh powder. The only sound for miles was the engine and the crunch of my boots when I stopped for a quick stretch. I noticed the way the exhaust plume shimmered, catching the nascent sunlight, briefly iridescent. A beautiful, irrelevant detail. When I reached the shore pullout, the terrain shifted to open ice. The wind picked up, whipping fine snow across the frozen surface. Array 7C was still a distant point, a tiny, unwavering star against the fading night. As I got closer, the anomaly didn't diminish. If anything, it became more pronounced. The beacon was impossibly bright, a pure white point that seemed to suck the color from everything around it. My eyes watered from the intensity, yet the ice directly beneath it, the ice just a few meters away, was still dark. There was no diffuse glow, no scattering of light particles. It was a perfect, contained sphere of pure illumination. I dismounted the snowmobile about 50 meters away, pulling out my handheld spectrum analyzer. The device, designed to measure light intensity and wavelength, immediately overloaded. Its screen flashed a max out warning, then went blank. I tried again, shielding the sensor, adjusting its aperture to the smallest setting. Still nothing. The device, built to handle direct sunlight, couldn't cope with this. This was a direct violation of protocol. Never approach a high-intensity light source without proper eye protection and calibrated measurement tools. My tools were failing. I put on my darkest welding goggles, then my glacier glasses over those. Even through 2 layers of extreme filtration, the beacon was a blinding point. I walked slowly, crunching through the hard snow. Up close, the beacon itself was a standard navigational unit, a meter-tall cylinder with a clear, reinforced polymer lens. There was no ice buildup on the lens, no condensation. It was perfectly clean. I reached out a gloved hand, expecting to feel intense heat. The polymer housing was cold, not ambient cold, but dead cold, as if no energy was radiating from it at all. I looked at the ice directly beneath the beacon. It was dark. The snow on its surface was undisturbed, a dull, unlit gray. I shone my headlamp onto it. The headlamp's beam, a mere fraction of the beacon's intensity, illuminated the snow, creating shadows, highlighting the individual crystals. The beacon, meanwhile, continued its silent, contained brilliance, throwing no light, casting no shadow. It was a perfect point of light, existing in isolation from the physics of light itself. I remembered a summer afternoon, years ago, watching my younger sister play with a magnifying glass, focusing sunlight into a tiny, burning point on a leaf. The heat, the smell of scorching, the way the light gathered and then spread, illuminating the dust motes in the air. This beacon was the opposite. All the light, none of the interaction. I tried to run a local diagnostic on the beacon's internal systems, plugging my tablet into the service port. The tablet's screen flickered, then went dark. A circuit breaker tripped in its internal power supply. The beacon itself, however, remained on, a perfect, impossible point of light. I stood there, goggles on, staring at it. The dome camera, back at the pullout, would still be showing that blinding flare, that gain ghost, and the dull, unlit ice. I couldn't clean the lens, because the lens wasn't the problem. I couldn't calibrate the beacon, because its internal sensors reported perfect function. The protocol for troubleshooting light sources had simply failed. There was no procedure for a beacon that emitted light but did not throw it. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't even properly measure it. All I could do was report what I saw, a light that was and was not. I packed up my useless tools, the cold seeping into my bones, a different kind of cold than the Arctic air. The beacon remained, a bright, silent contradiction in the vast, dark expanse of ice. I've spent 15 years in coastal communications, most of them in this signal hut overlooking the North Atlantic. My console is a familiar landscape of blinking lights, worn buttons, and the constant low hum of the amplifiers. I monitor a dozen channels from commercial shipping lanes to emergency services, But my primary responsibility is the regional ranger network. Every unit, every vessel, every patrol has a unique call sign. It's the bedrock of our system, a protocol as rigid as the tide charts we rely on. We log every transmission, every hail, every response. Clear identification is paramount. It was a Tuesday night, late October. The air outside was sharp with the scent of salt and damp earth, a precursor to the first real freeze. Inside, the hut was warm, almost too warm, and the steady drone of the HVAC unit was a constant companion. I'd been on shift for 10 hours, and the hum of the old console was starting to blur the edges of my focus. A large gray moth, drawn by the hut's interior light, beat itself with frantic taps against the window pane beside my console, a rhythmic, irritating distraction. Around 0217 local, Ranger Unit 3 Bravo hailed me. Control 3 Bravo, checking in from Blackwater Cove mouth. Conducting perimeter sweep. Any traffic? Blackwater Cove. It's a notorious dead zone for radio, a deep cut in the coastline surrounded by steep granite cliffs. Signal always struggles there. I keyed the mic. 3 Bravo, control. Negative traffic. Signal weak. Advise relocation if extended comms required. Understood, control. The ranger's voice crackled, already fading. Just a quick visual. Will advise when clear. Standard exchange. I logged the time and location. Then something unexpected happened. Before Unit 3 Bravo could fully clear the channel, a distinct, clear voice broke through the static. Control, this is 7 Alpha. My hand froze over the logbook. My eyes scanned the active unit list on the digital display. Unit 7 Alpha. That call sign had been retired last winter. Ranger Miller's unit. He'd gone missing during a blizzard. His patrol vehicle found abandoned near the northern trail. His body was never recovered. The call sign was officially decommissioned, archived, never to be reused for at least 5 years. It was a firm protocol. I blinked, attributing the momentary confusion to fatigue. Maybe I'd misheard. Station calling control. Please repeat call sign. The voice came back, calm, precise, devoid of static. Control 7 Alpha, responding to 3 Bravo's hail, located within Blackwater Cove. The signal strength meter for this transmission was nearly pegged, a solid 5x5, which was impossible for Blackwater Cove. And the voice itself, it had a peculiar quality, a subtle echo, not like a repeater, but as if the sound itself was layered, one voice slightly out of sync with another, creating a strange metallic resonance. I'd heard atmospheric interference do weird things, but this felt different, more deliberate. 7 Alpha, I said, trying to keep my voice even. This call sign is currently retired. Identify yourself and state your purpose. There was a brief pause, then the voice returned. Purpose, patrol. Identity, 7 Alpha. The layered quality was more pronounced now, almost like 2 identical voices speaking in unison, but one fractionally delayed, creating a shimmering effect. It mirrored the intonation of my own previous transmission, a subtle, unsettling mimicry. I keyed my mic again, my focus sharpening. 3. Bravo, this is Control. Did you receive a response to your last hail from within the cove? A moment of static. Then the ranger's voice, now much clearer as they'd moved away from the dead zone. Negative, Control. Just the usual crackle. Why? Is there another unit out here? Stand by, 3 Bravo, I replied, my gaze fixed on the signal meter. It was still showing a perfect signal from within the cove. I knew Ranger Miller's patrol vehicle, A beat-up utility truck wouldn't have that kind of comms power, even if it were somehow still operational and parked in the cove. And it certainly wouldn't be transmitting from an empty cove. I remembered a summer afternoon, years ago, fishing with my partner off the old pier, the quiet punctuated only by gulls and the gentle slap of waves, a stark contrast to the silence that now felt heavy in the hut. 7 Alpha, I transmitted. Control requires visual confirmation of your location. Describe your vessel or vehicle. The response was immediate. Location confirmed. Blackwater Cove. No vessel. No vehicle. My breath hitched. Then how are you transmitting, 7 Alpha? I demanded, abandoning standard protocol to get answers. My job was to identify and verify, and this transmission defied every rule. Transmission source, present. The voice was utterly devoid of inflection, yet the layered echo seemed to deepen, making it sound hollow, vast. It felt like I was talking to the cove itself. I tried to raise my supervisor, but the line was busy. My fingers flew across the console, pulling up the archived logs for Unit 7 Alpha from last winter. The last recorded transmission from Ranger Miller was a routine check-in, logged at 23:48, the night he disappeared. His voice clear and tired. This voice now was a ghost of that, a warped reflection. 7 Alpha. I tried one last time, my voice tight. Who is this? The channel went silent for a long moment. Then, a burst of garbled sound, like white noise amplified, followed by a single, distinct phrase, layered and echoing, a perfect, chilling mimicry of my own voice from seconds ago. Who is this? The signal meter flickered wildly, then dropped to 0. The channel went dead, filled only with the faint, underlying hum of the console. I stared at the blank screen, the logbook open to a fresh page. My hands were shaking. I typed 0229, Channel 3 Ranger, anomalous transmission, Unit 7 Alpha, Blackwater Cove, mirrored voice layer detected. Source unknown. Ended abruptly. When the supervisor finally called back, I relayed the incident. He listened patiently, then asked for the audio logs. I pulled them up. The recording for the period 0217 to 0229 was there, but where the anomalous transmissions should have been, there was only static. A low, persistent hiss that bled into Ranger 3 Bravo's clear voice. The supervisor attributed it to a rare atmospheric ducting event or equipment malfunction. He advised me to run diagnostics on the console and the antenna rack, suggesting the cold might be affecting the older relays. I did as instructed. But as I walked out to the antenna rack, the cold air biting at my exposed skin, the smell of ozone was faint, normal. The equipment hummed steadily. There was no malfunction. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me deeper than the night air, that what I had heard had not been a malfunction. It had been an answer from an empty cove. For 15 years, I've been a rescue lead for the Regional Search and Rescue Team, specializing in cold weather and ice operations. My jurisdiction covers hundreds of square miles of interconnected lakes, rivers, and inlets, a labyrinth of waterways that freeze solid for half the year. My gear, a dry suit, ice claws, throw bags, a GPS unit, and a heavy spud bar, feels like an extension of my own body. I've seen my share of close calls, recoveries, and tragic accidents. Every year, someone underestimates the ice. Every year, we pull someone out, or we don't. This job teaches you to trust your instruments, your training, and your gut, usually in that order. It was mid-March, A deceptively warm day for the season, the kind of day that lulls people into a false sense of security. The sun was bright, but the air still held a sharp, metallic bite. My partner and I were on a routine patrol, checking ice conditions around the northern inlets. These areas are notorious for unpredictable currents and thin ice, even in the dead of winter. Our protocol dictates that we establish a warning rope line across the mouth of any inlet, showing significant open water or compromised ice. It's a simple, effective measure, a visual boundary that screams danger. We just finished deploying a section of rope near Osprey Inlet, marking off a particularly slushy area. I was logging the coordinates into the handheld GPS, noting the air temperature at 34 degrees Fahrenheit and the ice thickness, which varied wildly from a solid 12 inches to a mere 4 near the current churned seam. My partner was packing up the last of the orange pylons when he called out, his voice low, "Hey, take a look at this." I walked over, my boots crunching on the granular surface of the late-season ice. He was pointing towards the inlet seam, about 50 yards from our position. The seam itself was a jagged line of dark, open water, maybe 20 feet across at its widest point, slowly widening with the spring thaw. It was a familiar sight, the dark eye of the inlet. But what caught my attention were the tracks. Boot prints, distinct and fresh, led from the solid ice towards that dark opening. They were the kind of heavy-duty, insulated winter boots we all wear out here. What struck me immediately was their unwavering path. They didn't veer, didn't hesitate. They crossed the ice directly to the lip of the open water. And they stopped. Just like that. At the very edge. Beside the boot prints, a line of spud marks ran parallel, evenly spaced, each a clean, circular impression in the ice. A spud bar is an essential tool for ice travel, used to test thickness ahead of you. These marks were neat, deliberate, indicating a careful, methodical advance. They too stopped abruptly at the lip. There was no splash, no broken ice, no sign of a struggle. The ice at the very edge, where the prints and spud marks terminated, was solid. It was a clean, sharp terminus. The boots crossed to a dark eye by the inlet and ended at the lip. Spud marks stood neat and then stopped. My first thought was that someone had been out testing the ice, perhaps a local checking fishing spots, and had simply turned back. It was a common occurrence, but there were no return tracks. None. The prints led one way, to the edge, and then they simply ceased. No return. My partner stated the obvious, his voice flat. We maintain a strict protocol for investigating tracks near open water. Secure a safety line, maintain distance, use a spud bar to test ahead, and never assume anything. I clipped my throw bag to my belt and handed the other end of the line to my partner, who anchored himself to a nearby ice auger. I began my approach, spudding ahead with every step, the rhythmic thunk of the bar against the ice echoing in the vast silence. The sun, high above, reflected off the ice crystals, creating a million tiny, shifting rainbows that danced across the surface. It was a beautiful, almost serene detail, completely at odds with the growing unease in my gut. As I got closer, I saw the clarity of the prints. They were recent, the edges still sharp, not yet softened by sun or wind. I knelt at the edge of the open water, my spud bar resting beside me. The water was dark, still, and impossibly deep. My mistake, a minor one born of habit, was expecting to see some disturbance, some telltale sign of entry. I scanned the water, then the ice, then the water again. Nothing. The surface was undisturbed. "Anything?" my partner called out. "Nothing visible," I replied, my voice hushed. No hole, no gear, no sign of entry. This was a problem. Our protocols for ice rescue are designed for scenarios where someone falls through. We locate the point of entry, assess the current, and begin a search pattern for the individual or their remains. But here, there was no entry. The tracks just ended. It was as if the person had simply stepped off the edge into thin air. I called dispatch. Unit 1 to dispatch. We have a possible missing person scenario at Osprey Inlet. Tracks lead to open water. No sign of entry or return. Requesting additional units, drone, and K9 for a perimeter search. Within the hour, the quiet inlet was a hub of activity. A drone buzzed overhead, its camera array scanning the open water and the surrounding ice. K9 units began their grid search, their handlers guiding them in wide arcs around the track terminus. Other SAR personnel arrived, establishing a wider search perimeter, looking for any other vehicle tracks, any dropped item, anything that could give us a clue. We deployed an underwater sonar unit into the dark eye of the inlet. The screen showed the murky depths, the irregular bottom, but no large objects, no indication of a submerged person. The water was surprisingly shallow right at the lip, only about 8 feet deep, before dropping off sharply. If someone had fallen in, they should have been visible, or at least the sonar should have picked them up. The K9 handler approached me, his dog panting softly beside him. "No scent trail away from the edge, Sled. The dog is indicating strong human scent right here at the tracks, but it just stops. No entry point scent either. It's like they just dissipated." This was the point where our standard protocol began to buckle. We were searching for a person who had vanished without a trace of how. My mind, trained to follow logical progressions of evidence, struggled with the contradiction. The tracks were undeniable. The open water was undeniable. The lack of entry was equally undeniable. It was a procedural paradox. I remembered for a fleeting moment a childhood memory of walking across a freshly frozen puddle, the satisfying, brittle crunch of the ice under my sneakers. It was a simple, uncomplicated joy, so far removed from the unnerving silence that now hung over the inlet. We continued the search for another 6 hours, until the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. We searched the shoreline, the surrounding woods, every inch of ice for a quarter-mile radius. Nothing. No vehicle, no gear, no other tracks. Just those boot prints and spud marks, ending precisely at the lip of the dark water, as if the individual had simply ceased to be. The case remains open, categorized as a disappearance. The official report notes the terminating track path and the absence of any physical evidence of entry into the water. The warning rope we deployed that morning still stretches across the inlet, a silent witness to an impossible event, a boundary that someone approached, observed, and then, inexplicably, transcended. We never found a body. We never found a reason. Just boot prints to open water and nothing beyond. I've been a dam tender for 17 years, working the same stretch of river in the high country. It's a quiet life, mostly. You learn the rhythm of the water, the groan of the concrete in a freeze, the hum of the generators. My territory covers 3 major gates and a half-dozen smaller flow controls across a 20-mile run. I know every bolt, every pressure transducer, every crack in the spillway. My shift starts at 0400 before the sun clears the eastern ridge. That's when the reservoir is still, a black mirror reflecting the faint stars, and the air bites hardest. That morning, the temperature gauge on the console read -8 degrees Fahrenheit. A clear, still night. Perfect conditions for ice formation, which meant a meticulous check of all gate seals and adjacent structures. My primary tool is the daily log, a thick binder where every reading, every observation, every minor adjustment gets recorded, time-stamped, and initialed. It's the Bible of dam operations, a continuous record of the structure's health. Any deviation, no matter how small, gets flagged. The standard procedure for a cold weather check involves a visual inspection from the catwalks, followed by remote sensor readings, and finally, a physical inspection of the sluice bay if anything seems amiss. Gate 3, a massive steel plate designed to manage overflow during spring melt, was my first stop. It's a beast, 30 feet wide, 40 high, set into a deep concrete channel. Its purpose is singular: hold back water until a controlled release is necessary. The gate should be a static barrier, a dead weight against the immense pressure of the reservoir. I started my rounds at 0430. The air was so still, I could hear the faint crackle of ice forming on the reservoir surface, a sound like distant static. The catwalk rails were slick with hoarfrost, and the metal had that specific metallic tang when I gripped it. I made my way to the Gate 3 housing, my breath pluming thick in the beam of my headlamp. The primary control panel showed all green. Gate fully closed, head pressure stable, no leakage detected. I logged the readings. Gate 3, status nominal. But as I stepped onto the catwalk rail directly above the sluice bay, a low sound reached me. It was a deep, resonant hum, almost too low to register as sound, more like a vibration in the concrete under my boots. I paused, listening. The air was absolutely still, not a whisper of wind. Yet, down in the sluice bay, where the dark water met the massive steel face of the gate, something was happening. A wisp of vapor, like a breath, curled away from the water surface directly in front of the gate. Then, in an impossible motion, it didn't dissipate upwards. Instead, it drew inward. A thin white stream pulled into the seam where the gate met the concrete wall. It was like watching a ghost inhale, and with it, the ice near the wall, a thin sheet perhaps a foot wide, lifted imperceptibly, then settled back down with a soft, wet shush. No wind, no visible current. Just that deep internal hum and the impossible draw. I checked the pressure gauge again on the local panel. My initial glance had been quick. This time, I saw it. A tiny, intermittent dip, a fluctuation of maybe 0.2 psi, too small to trigger an alarm, but definitely outside the expected stable reading. My first thought was a faulty sensor, or maybe thermal contraction playing tricks. I'd seen weirder things in my years, or so I told myself. A small mistake, a momentary dismissal of an anomaly. I logged the observation, adding a note about minor vapor draw, ice shift, no wind, but didn't immediately initiate a full diagnostic. I told myself I'd circle back after checking Gate 1. When I returned to Gate 3 an hour later, the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky in bruised purples and oranges. The air was still frigid, but the light brought a false sense of normalcy. The hum was still there, now more pronounced, a thrumming that resonated through the catwalk structure. I could feel it in my teeth. The vapor draw was no longer a wisp. A continuous, thin stream of mist was being pulled into the gate seam, a steady, silent intake. The ice along the wall was actively flexing, rising and falling by an inch or two, a slow, deliberate heave that defied the calm surface of the reservoir. I pulled out my hydrophone, a specialized acoustic sensor used to detect leaks or cavitation. I lowered the probe into the water near the gate. The readout on the small screen pulsed with a strong, low-frequency signal. Subsurface resonance. It wasn't the irregular, turbulent signature of a leak. This was a sustained, almost rhythmic vibration, originating from deep within the gate structure, or perhaps the bedrock beneath it. The frequency was too low for a pump, too steady for natural geological shifting. It was like the dam itself was resonating. My protocol dictated that any unexplained structural vibration or unusual gate behavior required an immediate attempt to cycle the gate, even partially, to check its mechanical integrity. I tried to initiate a partial lift from the local control panel, aiming for a 2-foot opening. The hydraulic motors whined, the pressure gauges flickered, but the gate didn't budge, not an inch. The control system reported gate obstruction, but there was no debris visible on the surface, no logs or ice chunks. The hum intensified, a low growl that vibrated through the steel deck plates. I radioed my supervisor. Unit 1 to control. I've got an issue at Gate 3. Unexplained resonance, vapor draw, and ice movement. Gates unresponsive to partial lift command. Acknowledge, Unit 1. Any visual obstruction? The supervisor's voice crackled. Negative visual. Hydrophone shows strong subsurface resonance. Gate reports obstruction, but nothing on the surface. Understood. Maintain observation. Do not attempt full cycle. I'm dispatching Unit 2 for backup and a thermal imaging sweep. ETA 45 minutes. I stood there on the catwalk, the cold seeping into my bones, watching the gate. The steady pull of mist, the silent heaving of the ice. It was like the gate was breathing, drawing in the cold air, exhaling nothing. I remembered a summer day, years ago, fishing with my son from a small aluminum boat on the lower lake. The water was warm, the sun bright, the only sound the gentle lapping against the hull. So different from this cold, silent, mechanical breathing. Unit 2, another dam tender, arrived with the thermal imager. We swept the gate, the concrete, the water surface. Nothing. No heat anomalies, no cold spots that would indicate a massive leak or a structural breach. The thermal signature of the gate was uniform, cold steel against colder water. Yet, the hydrophone continued to register the resonance, and the mist continued its impossible inward flow. "What do you make of it?" Unit 2 asked, his voice hushed. "Never seen anything like it. It's like the gate's got a vacuum pump behind it, but there's nothing there. Just water." We tried to run a diagnostic on the gate's hydraulic system. The system reported nominal pressure, sufficient fluid levels, no errors. Yet the gate remained unresponsive, locked in its obstructed state, even as the sensors indicated no physical obstruction. The protocol to fully open the gate for inspection, or to drain the sluice bay for a physical check, was now impossible. The gate simply would not move. As the sun climbed higher, the mist draw became less pronounced, but the subsurface resonance remained, a constant, low thrum. The ice continued its slow, deliberate rise and fall against the wall. We logged everything: the specific frequency of the resonance, the duration of the vapor draw, the exact timestamps of the ice movements. Contradictions piled up in the logbook. Gate unresponsive, no mechanical fault detected. Head pressure stable, yet localized draw observed. By midday, the phenomenon had subsided, or at least become less visible. The mist draw stopped. The ice settled, frozen solid again. The hum faded to a barely perceptible tremor. The gate remained locked, reporting an obstruction that wasn't there. We reported the situation to the supervisor. The decision was made to leave Gate 3 in its current state, under continuous remote monitoring, until engineers could arrive from headquarters. I made my final log entry for the morning shift. 12:15, Gate 3. Anomaly subsided. Gate remains unresponsive. Subsurface resonance detected. Unidentifiable source. The gate had breathed for a few hours, drawing in the cold vapor of the morning, a silent, impossible respiration. And then it stopped. But it never fully opened again. Not while I was there. I've been a maintenance hand for the Park Service for over 15 years, most of that time spent tending to the shore cabins along the northern lake. It's seasonal work, demanding in its own way. You learn the rhythm of these structures, the way they breathe with the weather, the quirks of their plumbing and their wood stoves. My toolkit is an extension of my arm: thermal imager, multimeter, flue brush, a well-worn logbook, and a heavy-duty wrench. I've seen everything from burst pipes in deep winter to bare-damaged doors in late spring. Or so I thought. The call came in just after noon, a late-season rental at Cabin 7. The renters had checked out early, citing unbearable cold. Dispatch relayed the message without much detail, just a standard service request. My internal clock immediately noted the temperature, a crisp 38 degrees Fahrenheit, with a stiff wind coming off the lake. It was a clear day, though, the kind that makes the water look like hammered steel. I figured it was a common issue. New renters, unfamiliar with a wood-burning stove, probably didn't keep the fire stoked or left a damper closed. It happens. That was my first small mistake, an assumption based on routine. Cabin 7 sits a little further down the shoreline, tucked into a stand of old-growth pine. The drive takes about 20 minutes from the main depot, mostly on a gravel track. As I pulled up, the cabin looked normal enough from the outside. No broken windows, no obvious damage. The wood rack next to the porch was full, neatly stacked, the logs still showing their fresh-cut ends. This was a good sign. It meant they at least had fuel. I grabbed my gear, signed the entry in my logbook with the time, 13:17, and approached the door. The lock was standard, a secure deadbolt that clicked open with a satisfying thud. As I pushed the door inward, a wave of cold air hit me. Not just ambient cold, but a deep, inert chill that felt like it had settled into the very bones of the structure. My breath plumed instantly. The air inside felt heavy, stagnant, as if it had been sealed off for weeks. My eyes went immediately to the large picture window facing the lake. It was filmed over, not with frost, but with a fine, even layer of condensation on the inside glass. This was unusual. In a cold cabin, you'd expect condensation to form on the outside if the interior was warmer, or perhaps a thin layer of frost if it was truly frigid inside and humid. But this was like a fine mist had been sprayed on the interior surface, obscuring the view. I moved to the wood stove, the cast iron heart of the cabin. It was a robust model, one I'd personally installed years ago. I reached out and touched its surface. It was dead cold. Not just cool, but the kind of cold that iron gets when it's been exposed to freezing temperatures for an extended period. My gloved hand registered no residual warmth whatsoever. I opened the firebox door. Inside, the ash bed was undisturbed, a fine gray powder, with no sign of fresh fall or recent combustion. No charred wood, no glowing embers, nothing. Yet, the primary draft control, a sliding plate at the bottom, was wide open. Fully engaged, the flue damper too was open. This was a direct contradiction to everything I knew about wood stoves. With the draft and damper open, a stove should draw air, especially in a cold cabin where the stack effect would be pronounced. Even if the fire had gone out, there should have been some residual warmth, some evidence of a struggle to keep it going. The ash bed should have been disturbed, at least. This stove had simply gone cold, utterly and completely, despite being set to draw. I pulled out my thermal imager. The cabin interior, as expected, showed a uniform blue, indicating low temperatures. But as I scanned closer to the stove, the readings became stranger. Around the firebox, and extending about 3 feet in every direction, the temperature dropped further, registering isolated pockets of dark purple and black, indicating temperatures several degrees below the general ambient cold of the cabin. This was the thermal pocket drop. It wasn't just cold, it was actively colder than its surroundings, defying the principle of thermal equilibrium. It was as if heat wasn't just escaping, but was being pulled out of that specific area. I checked the thermometer on my belt. 32.5 degrees ambient inside the cabin. The imager showed spots near the stove at 28 degrees, 27 degrees. My next step was to check the vent cap on the roof. Standard procedure for a cold stove is to ensure proper draft. I went back outside, retrieved my extension ladder, and carefully set it against the cabin wall. The wind was picking up, tugging at my jacket as I ascended. From the roof, I could see the vent cap clearly. It was unobstructed. No bird nests, no leaves, no ice buildup. The flue pipe itself looked sound. There was nothing to impede the draft. I climbed back down, the cold starting to seep into my bones despite my layers. I re-entered the cabin, the heavy, still air pressing in. I tried to light a small fire in the stove, just a few crumpled newspaper sheets and kindling. I wanted to see if the draft would pull. I struck a match. The flame flickered, then seemed to shrink, struggling against the unnatural chill. It caught the paper, but the smoke didn't rise cleanly into the flue. Instead, it curled lazily, dissipating into the cabin air, a thin gray haze. The paper burned slowly, reluctantly, like it was being starved of oxygen, even with the draft wide open. It was a fight against something invisible. I remembered my grandfather teaching me how to build a fire, the way he'd always say, "A good fire breathes." This stove wasn't breathing. It was suffocating. I pulled out my multimeter, switched it to atmospheric pressure, and held it near the open draft. The reading was stable. No unusual fluctuations that would indicate a downdraft or a blocked flue. Everything on a technical level checked out, yet the stove refused to function. This was where my professional protocol began to fail. All my diagnostic steps pointed to a functional system, but the empirical evidence contradicted it. I radioed dispatch. Unit 1 to base. I'm at cabin 7. Stove issue is anomalous. Ambient temperature inside is 32.5. Stove is dead cold. Draft open. No ash disturbance. Thermal imager shows localized cold pockets below ambient near the stove. Flue and vent cap are clear. Cannot establish a draft. There was a pause, then the static-laced voice of the dispatcher. Copy Unit 1. Anomalous? Affirmative. It's like the heat was actively removed from the system. The window glass is filmed with condensation on the interior too. Securing the cabin. Recommend holding off on further rentals until further investigation. This isn't a simple repair. Understood, Unit 1. Log your findings. We'll mark it out of service. I spent another hour in the cabin, trying to make sense of it. I checked the exterior walls with the imager, looking for breaches, but found none. The cabin was sealed tight. The only sound was the wind outside, a low moan that seemed to resonate with the profound stillness inside. The air grew colder, the thermal pockets around the stove intensifying. It was a chill that went beyond mere temperature, a feeling of absence, of something vital having been withdrawn. I secured the cabin, double-locking the door. The report I filed was long, filled with contradictory observations and a complete lack of explanation. The stove that went cold, the open draft, the undisturbed ash, the filmed window, the thermal pocket drop, they all pointed to a system that had simply ceased to obey the laws of physics, leaving behind only the cold, hard fact of its inexplicable failure. I've been a volunteer guard for this section of the lake for 12 years. My patrol area covers the main public access points, including the North Shore boat ramp, a stretch of shoreline popular with anglers, and the adjacent nature preserve. My certifications include basic water rescue and wilderness first aid, and I carry a standard patrol pack, a handheld radio, and a set of binoculars. I know this lake. I know its currents, its winds, the way the light plays off the water at dusk. It was a Tuesday evening, just after 20 Hunkwak hours. The last boat had pulled out an hour prior. My routine for closing involved a visual sweep of the ramp and parking area, checking for abandoned gear, securing the gate, and logging conditions. The air was still. The lake surface was flat, reflecting the last bruised purples of the sunset. My log entry for weather would read, wind, 0 knots, water, calm, visibility, excellent. As I approached the boat ramp, I noted the faint, damp smell of concrete mixed with decaying lake algae, a familiar scent I'd associated with summer evenings here since I was a kid. I used to launch my grandfather's old aluminum fishing boat from this very ramp. The simple pleasure of a smooth launch, a stark contrast to the work I do now. My eyes scanned the area. That's when I saw it. A rescue rope. Yellow, braided polypropylene, standard issue. It was secured to the heavy-duty cleat post on the east side of the ramp. This rope should have been stowed in the gear locker. Instead, it ran down the concrete slope, its free end draped near the waterline. About halfway down its length, a knot was tied. It was a static pinch twist, a complex knot designed for maximum grip and zero slippage, often used for temporary anchor points or securing heavy loads. The rope was swaying, not violently, not a wide arc. It was a slow, rhythmic oscillation, maybe 6 inches side to side. My first thought was residual current, perhaps from a late departing fishing skiff, but the water was glass. Not a ripple. My second thought was wind. I checked the tree line, the flags on the marina across the cove. Nothing moved. The air was dead still. I even held my hand up, palm flat, feeling for the slightest draft. There was none. This was a violation of a fundamental principle. A static object, especially a rope secured to a fixed point, does not move without an external force. My training hammered this home. Every piece of equipment, every line, every knot is either static or dynamic, and its state is always attributable to a known cause. I pulled out my binoculars, focusing on the rope. The sway continued, steady, almost deliberate. And then, the knot moved. The static pinch twist, designed to be immutable, began to slide. Slowly, with a horrifying fluid grace, it crept down the rope. I estimate it traveled about a hand's length, maybe 6 inches, toward the water. It didn't jerk or slip. It simply translated along the rope's axis, maintaining its form until it stopped. The rope continued its gentle sway, the knot now positioned closer to the water's edge. My radio crackled with static. Dispatch was checking in for my status report. Unit 1, confirm ramp clear for gate closure. Ramp clear, dispatch, I responded, my voice betraying none of the unease tightening my gut. I decided to investigate before reporting an anomaly. It might be a trick of the light, fatigue playing on my eyes. I'd been on patrol since 14 Hunquak. I approached the rope cautiously, my boots crunching faintly on the loose gravel at the top of the ramp. As I got closer, the swaying eased, then ceased entirely. The rope hung motionless, taut now, almost rigid. The knot was perfectly still. I knelt beside it, examining the static pinch twist. The knot was impeccably formed, every turn and loop in place. It looked as if it had been tied by an expert, then somehow fused into position. I tested the rope. It felt solid, under significant tension, though the cleat post showed no signs of strain, nor did the rope itself appear stretched. My protocol for an unsecured or anomalous rope is to untie it, inspect it for damage, and return it to the gear locker. I reached for the knot, intending to loosen it. My fingers found no purchase. The knot was impossibly tight. I tried to work the loops, to find the starting point of the twist. It was like trying to untie a knot carved from solid wood. I pulled out my multi-tool, deploying the marlinspike. I tried to insert the tapered point into the knot's core, but it wouldn't penetrate. The material felt dense, almost metallic under the spike, not the yielding give of braided polypropylene. A faint, acrid smell began to register. It wasn't the damp concrete or the algae. It was metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike, or old, corroded copper. It was subtle, but distinct, overriding the usual lake smells. This was the kind of detail I'd log, but it felt irrelevant to the rope's movement, yet it added to the growing sense of wrongness. I tried again, putting more force into the marlinspike. My hand slipped, and the spike scraped against the knot with a high-pitched, almost singing sound. As the sound faded, I felt a subtle vibration in the rope, a low hum that resonated through my fingertips. Then, the knot moved. Not sliding down this time. It retracted. The static pinch twist pulled itself back up the rope, a slow, deliberate inch, then another, until it was precisely where I had first seen it, before its initial slide. The rope, which had been under tension, seemed to relax slightly, but still held a degree of tautness that felt unnatural for a slack line. I stared at the knot, then at the cleat post, then at the water. No explanation. This wasn't a mechanical failure. It felt like a deliberate. I've been a survey tech for 17 years, mostly on infrastructure projects across the Pacific Northwest. Dams, bridges, large-scale earthworks, anything that requires precise measurement and a deep understanding of terrain and hydrology. My tools are the total station, GPS receivers, laser scanners, and a healthy respect for what the environment can do. My job is to ensure that what's on the blueprint matches what's on the ground, down to a millimeter. Consistency is key, and I rely on predictable conditions. This particular project involved monitoring structural integrity along the old reservoir dam and establishing new range stakes for erosion tracking on the eastern bank. It was early May, still cool in the mornings, but the sun promised to burn off any lingering mist. I was out before dawn, setting up my Trimble S9 on a control point overlooking the main body of the lake. The air was perfectly still. I remember the sharp, clean scent of damp earth and pine needles warming in the first light, a smell I've always associated with peaceful, productive mornings. Down by the dam's spillway, the windsock hung limp, and the array of small warning flags on the apron lay flat against their poles. Ideal conditions for optical work. No wind shear to distort line of sight. No thermal currents rising from a hot ground. My protocol is always to establish a baseline. I took initial readings on known benchmarks, the primary datum on the dam's north abutment, a fixed point on the old ranger station, and a series of reference markers along the western shore. All within tolerance. The GPS units were locked onto a solid constellation, reporting sub-centimeter accuracy. I logged the first set of observations at 0617. Everything was by the book. Then I saw it. Directly over the mid-span of the lake, perhaps 1,000 yards out from the dam face, a white mass had materialized. It wasn't fog. Fog rolls, dissipates, responds to air currents. This thing stood like a wall, dense and opaque, perfectly vertical on its edges, stretching perhaps 200 yards across the water. It was too white, too solid, too still. The flags at the dam were still flat. There was no wind to carry fog, no thermal inversion to trap it. It was just there. I checked my watch, then my instruments. The total station's internal temperature sensor read stable. My GPS handheld showed no unusual atmospheric interference. I swung the total station's telescope towards the phenomenon. The auto-target struggled to lock. The crosshairs shimmered, almost vibrating, as if looking through heat haze, but the air around me was cold. I tried to take a distance reading to the near edge of the whiteout. The instrument cycled, gave an error code, then finally returned a distance that fluctuated wildly by several meters, far outside the expected precision. I dismissed it as an optical anomaly, maybe some unusual refraction off the water surface that my atmospheric correction model wasn't accounting for. A minor mistake, perhaps, to assume known physics could explain what I was seeing. My partner, a newer tech, was due to meet me at 0800 to help set the new range stakes on the eastern bank. I decided to use the time to get a closer look. I packed up the total station and drove the truck along the access road that ran parallel to the lake, aiming for a small, rocky spit that jutted out near the midpoint. As I drove, the whiteout remained fixed. Its edges were unnervingly sharp against the clear blue sky and the calm, dark water. There was no transition, just an abrupt boundary. I pulled the truck onto the spit, grabbed my range pole and a handheld GPS, and walked towards the water's edge. The air grew noticeably colder, even though the sun was now fully up. A faint, metallic smell, like ozone after a lightning strike, hung in the air. I approached the whiteout, which now seemed to extend from the water surface directly upwards, an impenetrable curtain. I could hear nothing from within it. No lapping water, no birds, just a profound, unnatural silence. I stopped about 10 feet from its edge. The GPS unit in my hand started to glitch, the position jumping erratically by tens of feet. then settling, then jumping again. It was useless for accurate positioning here. This rendered my standard survey protocol of continuous data logging impossible. Curiosity, or perhaps a professional stubbornness, pushed me forward. I wanted to see what was inside. The ground here was a mix of fine silt and decomposed granite, damp from the lake. I took a deliberate step, leaving a clear boot print in the soft earth just outside the edge of the veil. Then I stepped into the whiteout. It was like walking into a solid cloud. Visibility dropped instantly to absolute zero. The cold intensified, a deep, bone-aching chill. The ozone smell was overwhelming. I took 2 more steps, feeling the ground beneath my feet, then stopped. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. There was no sound at all. Not even my own breathing seemed to register. It was a complete sensory deprivation, but with an oppressive weight to the silence. I felt a fleeting memory of being a kid, walking through fresh, deep snow on a winter morning, leaving crisp, perfect tracks behind me. That memory was abruptly shattered by the chilling reality of this moment. I turned around, took 3 steps back, and emerged from the whiteout. The light hit me with jarring intensity. I looked down. The boot print I'd made, outside, the veil was still there, sharp and clear. But the prints I'd made, inside it, they were gone. Completely. The ground where I'd walked was smooth, undisturbed silt, as if I had floated. My heart hammered. This wasn't right. This wasn't physics. I stared at the blank patch of ground, then back at the impassive white wall. I took another step, placing my boot firmly on the ground, creating a new, perfect print. Then, with a rising sense of dread, I stepped into the whiteout again. Just 1 step this time, and immediately stepped back out. I looked down. The initial print was still there, crisp. But the new print, the one I'd just made after emerging from the veil, was wrong. It was elongated, stretched, as if my foot had slid forward by 6 inches after landing. The heel mark was faint, the toe deeply impressed, but the overall shape was distorted. Too long for my size 10 boot, twisted slightly to the left. It was as if the ground itself had shifted under my foot, or my foot had moved through a different dimension. I tried to radio my partner. "Unit 2, this is Unit 1. Do you copy, over?" Static. Just a low, buzzing static that seemed to mock the profound silence of the whiteout. I tried dispatch. Same result. My professional protocol for communication had failed completely. I took out my range pole, a 10-foot aluminum rod, and extended it. I slowly pushed the tip towards the whiteout. As it entered, it seemed to shimmer, the visible portion of the pole appearing to bend slightly, like a stick underwater, but the air was perfectly clear. I pushed it further. The pole felt light, almost buoyant, as if it were passing through a less dense medium, yet the veil itself felt solid, resistant. I pulled it back. The pole was normal, undamaged. I stood there, watching the whiteout. It remained fixed, unmoving, like a static charge in the air, a phenomenon that defied every law of fluid dynamics and optics I knew. It was a standing wave, not of water, but of something else, something that held its place and carried with it a distortion of reality. The flags at the dam remained flat, a silent testament to the impossible calm of the day, outside the impossible white. I retreated to my truck, my hands shaking as I packed up the pole. I spent another hour trying to get coherent readings from the dam face, but the total station kept giving me erratic data, phantom distances, impossible elevations, all within the general direction of the whiteout. I logged the data, but it was useless, contradictory, a complete write-off for the day's work. I took a few photos of the distorted print, but the camera couldn't capture the unsettling wrongness of it, only the physical elongation. I knew no one would believe me. The whiteout still stood, a silent, impenetrable wall, waiting. I've been a field supervisor for regional operations for 15 years. My territory covers a significant portion of the northern range, where the paved roads thin out and the logging tracks become the primary arteries. It's a job that demands precision, a keen eye for detail, and an unwavering adherence to protocol. Out here, a misplaced rock or an unusual set of tracks in the snow isn't just an anomaly. It's a potential incident, a call for assistance, or a sign of trouble. My vehicle, a heavily modified 4x4, is my office and often my lifeline, equipped with everything from a satellite comms array to a full medical kit. This particular day started like many others in late winter. A light snowfall overnight had dusted the ground, just enough to obscure old tracks and highlight new ones. The air was crisp, the temperature holding steady at 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and the morning sun was just beginning to burn off the last wisps of fog in the valleys. My patrol route that morning was a standard sweep of the western access roads, checking on remote equipment caches and ensuring the turnouts were clear. After any significant weather event, the first order of business is always to verify road conditions and identify any unexpected activity. Every print, every tread mark, every disturbance in the fresh snow tells a story, and it's my job to read it. My primary protocol for any vehicle found off the main road, especially in a designated turnout, is a comprehensive perimeter check. This involves a slow, deliberate walk around the vehicle, examining for damage, signs of forced entry, and critically, any tracks leading to or from it. This rule is absolute. It's how we determine if someone is in distress, if a vehicle has been abandoned, or if there's been illicit activity. The snow is our ledger, and it rarely lies. I spotted the truck around 0930, tucked into a small berm turnout about 3 miles past the old lumber mill. It was a dark blue, older model pickup, not one of our service vehicles. Its presence was immediately unusual. This turnout wasn't commonly used for anything other than a quick stop or for staging equipment, and I knew all the local contractors. I pulled my vehicle alongside, leaving enough space to maneuver, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the faint creak of my suspension settling and the distant caw of a raven. Stepping out, the cold hit immediately, a dry, biting cold that promised clear skies but demanded respect. My boots crunched on the packed snow as I began my perimeter check. The first thing I noticed was the tracks. A single set of boot prints, distinct in the fresh powder, circled the truck. Not just once, but in a continuous, unbroken ring. My initial thought was that someone had been pacing, perhaps waiting for a tow or trying to figure out a problem. I walked the circuit myself, following the prints. They were a standard work boot pattern, size 11 or 12 by the depth and length. The individual had taken deliberate, even steps, maintaining a consistent distance from the truck's body. As I completed the first pass, my eyes naturally went to the truck's doors. This is where the initial unease began to settle. The door seals, particularly the driver's side, were perfectly clean. No scuffs, No brush marks from heavy clothing, no snow scraped away from the rubber. It was as if the person who made the tracks had never actually approached the door, let alone opened it to get in or out. I paused, re-examining the prints where they passed closest to the driver's side. They continued their perfect arc, never deviating, never leading away, never leading to the door. This was a direct violation of my core protocol. Tracks should always have an origin and a destination relative to the vehicle, especially if someone was waiting. I continued my slow circuit, my gaze now more focused, more critical. The truck itself appeared undamaged. Windows were clear, no condensation inside. The tailgate rack was empty, no tools, no gear. The license plate was from an adjacent county. I ran the plate number through my handheld terminal, but the signal was spotty out here, and it took a moment to connect. While I waited, I bent closer to the tracks. The snow had a slight, almost imperceptible crust on its surface, indicating they were a few hours old, perhaps made at dawn. The crisp, cold smell of pine needles, sharp and invigorating, was strong here, mixed with the faintest hint of diesel from my own idling engine. It was a familiar scent, one that usually calmed me, but today it only highlighted the strangeness. The terminal finally chimed, pulling up a registration for a private owner. No flags, no outstanding warrants. Just a regular vehicle, parked in an irregular way, surrounded by impossible tracks. I circled the truck again, slower this time, my mind trying to reconcile the evidence. The prints were too uniform, too perfectly circular, to be someone simply pacing in frustration. It was a deliberate, almost ritualistic circuit. There was no point where the loop broke, no scuff mark where a person might have stopped, turned, or leaned against the vehicle. It was a closed system of prints, a self-contained anomaly. I reached for my radio, intending to call dispatch and report the abandoned vehicle, requesting a tow and a check on the registered owner. My hand was still reaching for the microphone when a distinct click echoed from the radio cradle. It wasn't static, not a squelch, but a clear, mechanical click, as if the transmit button had been depressed and immediately released. My hand froze mid-air. The radio was securely in its cradle, the microphone clipped in place. No one had touched it. I stared at the unit, then at my hand, then back at the radio. My mind, trained for logic and procedure, searched for an explanation, a loose connection, a power surge. But the vehicle's electrical system was robust, and there were no other signs of malfunction. I'd never experienced an uncommanded click like that in 15 years. A flicker of a memory surfaced, a mundane one. When I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, my younger brother and I would sometimes go out after a fresh snowfall and make elaborate, nonsensical tracks in the backyard, just to confuse our parents. We'd walk backward, or on our hands and knees, creating patterns that led nowhere, just for the sheer joy of it. This felt different. This was precise, methodical, and utterly devoid of innocent play. I decided to try the radio again, manually. I unclipped the microphone, pressed the transmit button. Dispatch, this is Unit 1. Do you copy? A moment of silence, then dispatch's calm voice. Unit 1, loud and clear. Go ahead. I reported the abandoned pickup, giving the plate number and location. I hesitated, then decided against mentioning the strange prints or the radio click. It sounded like something I couldn't put in a log entry. It sounded like something that would raise more questions about my state of mind than about the vehicle. Understood, Unit 1. We'll initiate a welfare check on the owner and send a tow. ETA for the tow is approximately 90 minutes. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 1 standing by. I clipped the microphone back into its cradle. The silence returned, heavier now. I looked at the circling prints again. The perfect, unbroken loop. The clean door seals. The click from the radio. My protocols for abandoned vehicles had failed to provide a logical narrative. The tracks told a story that made no sense. They were a patrol, but of what? For whom? And the radio. That was a system failure, but without a cause. I stepped back from my vehicle, keeping the truck in view, my gaze sweeping the tree line. The sun was higher now, glinting off the snow. I pulled my axe from its sheath on my belt. Not because I expected trouble, but because the cold, illogical silence had begun to feel like a presence. I waited. The tracks around the truck, a silent, disturbing riddle in the snow.